All right, everyone, time to talk about a little bit of polling with regards to Trump's approval, because a new poll from NBC came out. I believe it was a Wall Street Journal crossover poll. And it says Trump is at 45% approval. Now, I've had about a half a dozen people, message this to me, and a bunch more mention it publicly on several platforms saying, oh, Trump's approval didn't drop after the Helsinki summit. Huzzah, and by the way, Sticks, you were wrong. Because, of course, I said after the summit I expected it possible his approval drops by several points. You're not understanding. I may very well have been wrong, but it's not this poll that shows that, because this poll actually began a day before the summit. So for 2 days of that 4-day polling period, you don't have the summit results. The first day of polling, there is no summit. The second day was the day of. So the fallout, any fallout takes a few days to register. When you're looking at RCP or you're looking at polls, be very, very careful about paying attention to the dates of the polling. But, big but, yeah, people pointed that out on the other video, thought it was funny. There is another poll by Rasmussen, which, again, we got to take it with a little grain of salt. Historically, despite its good showing in 2016 and seemingly during the special elections. I'll get into that in a moment. That poll also shows him, I believe, at 44, which would be a slight rise in approval, and that one does take place after the summit. At least 3 days of that polling do. That could indicate that his approval has not indeed suffered any impact. Now, the NBC poll, essentially, during that period, it gives him high marks for his handling of the economy, buoying his support, lower marks on foreign policy, specifically with regards to the summit, where it's included. However, you've got to understand something. In their analysis, what they're saying is that the speculation generally is when Trump gets hammered by the media, his core fans support him more, along with maybe people on the periphery. It hardens his support. Smaller group, but much more hardened approval. That makes sense. That's essentially how he won in 2016. It wasn't he had this massive coalition, massive majority of U.S. people loved him, hated Hillary Clinton. It wasn't that. It was essentially related to turnout, specifically in competitive states that he targeted and Hillary Clinton did not. She was misled by polling into think that states she was 10 points behind and were competitive, while ignoring those that she thought she had in the bag because she figured she was 4 or 5 points ahead. She was misled by polling. She believed it erroneously. She didn't listen to her own staff that told her to be more cautious. That's one reason, one major reason why she lost. That, and she alienated a lot of people. She drove up support for Trump among his core fans for massive turnout. And also the millennials have begun to flee the Democratic Party. It's gonna bring huge problems in 2020. They're not taking the threat seriously. But when I look at this polling, the NBC poll that everyone is showing me does not show anything with regards to the summit, really. And it could be a fluke. Both of these polls could. When you've only got 2 polls that include any time period thereafter, that's not enough. That's not enough data. I want 3 or 4 more. There is a lag in polling. It can be up to a week, because polling isn't conducted every single day by every single firm. But trust me, I wish it was. I wish they would do it on a rolling basis. Every couple days they start a new polling period. We would have many more markers. The scatter of the numbers would be more narrow. It would be much better. Regardless of the methodology they employ, you would have much higher accuracy. It would almost defeat the purpose of making political predictions, because you could definitively say what the result would be as long as you also polled for turnout, for enthusiasm. If you can develop a perfect system to measure enthusiasm, then every pollster, as far as the punditry side, like the Nate Silvers, they'll be out of business. I'd be out of business at that point with that part of my content, because it'd be pointless. Within a point, you'd know everything. But Trump's approval may very well have risen thereafter. If it does, if that reflects hardened approval and he's at 45, well, there's the magic number. All he has to do is not screw up, and the Republicans will maintain the House. They will take power in the Senate. They'll get at least 2 extra seats, probably 3. They'll win the midterms. It'll crush the Democratic Party. The Democrats can't... the thing is, the Democrats can't really seal the deal and declare victory unless they take the Senate. Because for so long there, for months, when they were well ahead in the generic ballot, they kept drumming that up. They're like, we're going to take everything. We're going to kick Trump out of office. He will not get his Supreme Court nominees. Ha 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 ha, we will have the Senate. It's looking less and less like that'll happen. You're still the underdogs by a far marker in my estimation, despite being maybe 7 points ahead in the generic ballot. That's not good. As far as the generic ballot goes, too, on the back of a good economy, that could narrow. Essentially, the reason why the spread increased again and the Democrats, began to pull ahead in the generic ballot was largely related, I think, to foreign policy foibles. It's certainly not economic. On the economy, the Republicans are kicking ass. Foreign policy, a little less so. Maybe it's a result of, propaganda, the corporate media. But the thing is, this is saying, and I think I concur, that at least among people that kind of already support Trump, that, 45-ish% of the population that leans towards him, they're more likely to support him if that happens. And this bleeds over into the generic ballot. Look, there are also never Trumpers that fundamentally they're still going to vote for the Republican candidate, plus Trumpers that will vote for the Republican candidate because Trump says so. That's what it boils down to. That's more than 50% of the voters in a lot of these places. Because of the overlap, it's not necessarily always true, but it certainly tilts things in the Republicans' direction. I believe that turnout fundamentally in most parts of the country that are up for re-election purposes will be higher for Republicans. Is it enough to overwhelm a 7-point lead for Democrats? No, not routinely, but it certainly keeps the Senate for them. It probably keeps them the House very narrowly. They don't win. The Republicans, there's no scenario in which they gain more power in the House. It's impossible because of the structure of the races. But they can take solace in knowing that there's also almost no scenarios in which they lose the Senate. They probably gain at least a seat there. If the Republicans gain 2 or 3 seats there and maintain the House, they've won. If they manage to lose the House, but they still gain in the Senate, he still gets his Supreme Court nominees, appointees can get rammed through. He'll still have the ability to pass a lot of legislation. It's just that he's going to need to negotiate more. He's been trying anyway. The Democrats don't want to buddy-buddy with him, but the thing is, big mistake for the Democrats if they win the House and then immediately start obstructing. What happened when Boehner's Congress started doing that? The Republicans got wiped off the face of the earth at the time. They were constantly taking the blame. Trump has to come along and save the Republicans from themselves in order to break the stalemate, essentially. I still, at this point, favor the Republicans to maintain the House. It's more narrow. We still got to look at the generic ballot. Look, it's only the middle of July. We've got to wait until around the end of September before things really cook up. Especially, we've got to see the effect on Senate races in August, when 6 Democrats that are in competitive races won't be able to actually go out and campaign for a month. The Republicans, the challengers that aren't in office, they don't need a recess. They'll be able to campaign. It's lopsided. It's one more thing that favors the Republicans. You can expect the Democrats to talk a lot about that and say, well, right now we're stuck here and they're out campaigning. It's not fair. And people, I think, will react to that by saying that's sour grapes. If you had done your job, McConnell never would have been capable of invoking his ability to say the recess isn't going to happen. Never would have happened because there'd be no legitimate reason. It would definitely be at that point political. The Republicans would never have dared to do it. But because you have so much unfinished work, it makes it easy for McConnell. Meanwhile, the House goes off its merry way and does its thing. It almost wouldn't even matter if the Democrats did retake the House, because without control of the Senate, they can't stop Trump's executive actions. They can't stop him from appointing people, including SCOTUS justices, in the next 2 years. It is likely he gets another because Ginsburg is 85 years old. It is likely that in the next couple of years she kicks off. And as long as it isn't within 6 months of the 2020 election, he'll get his appointee. It'll be easy for him. He'll expedite the process because the Senate will be on his side, which means he gets another. I mean, come on, it'll reshape the court for a couple decades. And then he probably wins re-election anyway, so it won't matter. That's about all. Peace out.